Hi. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Seems not everyone is here yet, so we'll start in a few minutes when everyone's here. Musend, can you please accept my live transcript request? Thank you. Okay, so regardless of how many are able to join, we'll start in 2 minutes. So let's get started, shall we? We have a lot of things to see today. So welcome everyone to today's course on React Native, cross-platform mobile development, part 1. So what we will see today is that we will quickly discuss what React Native is. Before I go any further, can everyone see the presentation and hear me fine? Just so I know. Good. Good. So, like I was saying, we'll quickly discuss what React Native is. We'll have a quick slide about the installation of the Android environment, even though we won't be doing it together today as it takes too much time. I'll link in the presentation a tutorial so you can get going with the installation. We'll discuss Expo versus no Expo when starting a new React project. We'll quickly create an Expo app, and then we'll get started on an app without Expo that we will run on the Android emulator. And then we'll have a bit of practice where we will go through views, text styling, touch events. We'll work with a few important libraries, and we'll try to recreate the project that we worked on during our React sessions, but this time on mobile and in React Native. So that will be our goal for today. So what is React Native really? So React Native is a JavaScript framework that we know. It is based heavily on React. The differences between both are fairly minimal. There are, if you're good with React, it shouldn't take you a long time to get going with React Native. As history goes, React Native was developed by Facebook following a prototyping done during a hackathon in 2015. And actually, it's in production for a lot of really well-known apps. For example, the Facebook mobile app is done with React Native, Instagram as well, but also Skype, Discord, Uber, Pinterest as well, for those who know Pinterest. So a lot of big products use React Native in production today. So why use it exactly? Why are we using React Native? Historically, it has always been known that it's better to develop in native languages. For example, if you're, excuse me, if you're developing for Android, for example, well, it is known that it should be better that you use Java or Kotlin. If you're developing for iOS, it should be good to use Objective-C and Swift. So before we go any further, I see a question in the chat. Noura asks, should React.js trainee attend this session? Yes, they should, as they are the best equipped actually for this session. React is, I think, a prerequisite to learning React Native. Learning React Native directly without knowing React is going to be a bit hard since it's based on React. So as I was saying, usually, historically, it's always been seen as better to develop using native languages because, well, they run natively, they're faster, and they are better suited to discuss directly with the phone's hardware. But React Native offers a cross-platform solution that is a bit different. For example, we have older cross-platform solutions such as Ionic, which are basically based on web frames, which are not really native software running on the mobile. It's rather running through a web browser that is hidden. But React Native doesn't work like that. It doesn't work through a web browser. But ultimately, what it means for us as developers, it means that we can write in JavaScript, a language that we learned, that we actually already use to write in the web. And we can use that same language to run apps that run on both Android and iOS with little to no modification required, and while minimally sacrificing performance. So no huge impact there in terms of performance. So, and as you can see, these arguments have also convinced more and more developers to adopt React over the years, as you can see in the graph on the screen right now. So usage for React Native has been increasing over time in the last few years, reaching a lot of people, a lot of developers that are making the switch. So before we get started, as I know most of you will not have a Mac OS laptop. You will not be having a Mac, as I don't have a Mac neither. We'll be working in the Android environment. So to get started with the Android environment, first thing to do is to install that environment. It has nothing to do with React Native, but basically we'll need to download some software. We'll need to have Node.js. We'll need to have Android Studio. We'll need to have the Java Development Kit, the JDK, and we'll need to have Python. And for those who would need the emulator as well, you'll need to enable VTX in the BIOS settings of your computer. So everything in here needs to be downloaded. This is quite big, especially for the Android Studio. Will be a few gigabytes to download. That's why we will not be doing it together today. It will take a lot of time to download and a lot of time to install as well. But I joined to the presentation video that will show you actually how we can install the SDK. It is a 15-minute video where you can follow along to basically install Android Studio, etc., while you go through the reviewing. So basically, it will go through everything discussed there. For anyone who is not well comfortable with the video format, I also joined a text format, text-based tutorial, where you'll have a step-by-step, basically follow along tutorial, where it will show you everything. We will take a look together quickly. So you'll have, it's a quick tutorial with the links that they joined. You'll see how you can then open the Android Studio to install everything that you might need. The Android SDK, the SDK tools. You'll go through, basically, you will have a platform where you can install SDK. SDK is going to be for emulator, for example, which version of Android it's going to run. You'll be downloading Android 8 or preferably Android 9. You'll be downloading a few tools, basically the build tools and the emulator, as you can see here. We'll have also it will also show you how to configure environment variables that we will need, mostly the Android home and the Java home, which will be joined to your path. And then it will help you create basically an emulator and how to start it. Basically, it will give you a virtual phone on your computer. It will also show you how you can open the BIOS and enable VTX if it's not already enabled. These basically are the steps, but keep in mind this will take quite a long time to install SDKs and set up everything. This is a long process. And again, this is why we'll skip that today. Just keep in mind, these are the steps. So download everything. Download the SDK with the Android version. Download the SDK tools. And then configure environment variables. So everything you will need will be in the presentation. And if you encounter any issues, please feel free to send me a message on WhatsApp or Discord, and I'll see how I can help you if you are having trouble with the installation. So that's about the installation part. Let's say we have everything installed and keep going with the course to see how we can get started with React. So some theory, we're gonna go through some theory before we start into practice. So Expo or no Expo? So what is Expo exactly? Expo is a framework that is built on top of React Native. And it's basically, excuse me, a bundle with tools and services built for React Native. Expo will help you get started easily and faster with React Native apps. And so basically there are two ways you can get started with the React app. Either you choose to use Expo or you don't. So what are the main differences and when to choose one option or the other? So Expo will get you started faster and will help you develop faster. So let's say, for example, you are on a short deadline, you're working with a client and they need their app as fast as possible. In this context, Expo is probably your best bet. Another good reason to use Expo is that you actually won't need Xcode if you're running on Mac, and you won't need Android Studio if you're working in the Android environment, like we just explained. And you get built-in native APIs to access the camera, the GPS, everything that you might need from the phone's hardware in your code. So I, for one, prefer not using Expo for a few reasons. One, because Expo adds what we call a layer of abstraction above React Native, which means it will do configurations and stuff that will hide it. Basically, some stuff will work by magic, let's say, because you won't see it and you won't see how it works. And that has a few other inconveniences. So for example, that means that all native APIs will need to be included in Expo since you have no access to that configuration. And not all APIs are available on Expo today. So there are a few APIs you might need that are not already Expo. And if you are using Expo, you will be stuck as you won't know how to add them later on. Another consequence of that is having no freedom of choice for some services. For example, if I want to use Firebase push notifications, that can't be used with Expo because Expo already has another push notification service that is called One Push, I think, or something like that. And I won't be having the freedom to change. So for the rest of this course, we'll actually not use Expo, but I think it's important to know that it exists and that you can use it. And it's not a bad choice if you don't need many APIs and if you want to get a small app running fast. So let's actually create an app with Expo. So what we need to do is that first we need to install the Expo CLI. We need to install it through npm globally so we can later use it. Then we'll need to initiate the app and we can then start it. So I'll show you how to do that now. Let's hop into the terminal. Okay, we're in the terminal right now. Let's zoom in a bit so you can see. So I won't be installing, so you should run npm -g expo CLI, and it will install your Expo CLI, but I won't be doing that now because it's already installed, so no need to waste time with it. So what we will do is that we'll write Expo init, and we write my Expo app. And what that will do is that we'll start creating an Expo app for us. It will ask us to choose between a manage workflow and a bare workflow. Every time by choosing as well if you want to use TypeScript or not. Muhammad asks, why are you going to explain Expo if we'll not use it? I will not use it. We will not use it in the course, but that doesn't mean you won't be using it in real life, in your career later on, or when you're working projects. So that's why I'm going to explain it. So you have the knowledge necessary to use Expo if you choose to use it. If you need it, you'll need to know how to use it. So that's why I will explain it to you, even though it will be brief. We'll go through it quickly, but you'll need to know how it's done because you might need to use it in few cases. Like I said, if you want to go quickly, it is actually way faster to start with Expo than without it. So it's really useful to know how to use it anyway. So as I was saying, here we have a choice. Either we can go with the manage workflow, which is going to be basically using Expo. If we go with the bare workflow, actually, we will not be using Expo, even though we are running through the Expo CLI. We won't be using Expo if we go with the bare workflow, as you will see later. We'll be using only the boilerplate in this case. So we'll go with the manage workflow. We won't be using TypeScript. We'll go with blank JavaScript minimal manage workflow. And we'll let it basically extract project files. Actually, it's going to use yarn. So maybe I will start again and say I want to use npm. So because I know you guys use npm, let's delete the app that we were writing, my Expo app. And let's start again by adding -- npm. So it uses npm instead of yarn. So we'll wait for a bit until it finishes installing our JavaScript dependencies. Basically, it's doing that through npm. So we'll have a package.json with everything ready so you can get started right away. This is taking a bit longer than expected. So maybe let's start already by reviewing the code it's created. In the meantime, let's open our code editor. It should open with the code. Okay, this is not the folder I wanted to open. So, okay, so it's done anyway. That's good. So it gives you a few instructions on how to get started and how to start the your Expo app. We'll go into our app. So Expo app. We'll open it in our code editor. I'll zoom in a bit so you can see. Okay. So we'll see that it created a few things for us. We see that we have a package.json with dependencies and scripts. So we have dependency, we have Expo, we have Expo status bar. We have React. As I said, it's React Native is based on React. So React will still be part of the project. We have the React DOM, React Native, and React Native Web as part of our dependencies. We have a Babel configuration, which is going to be using a preset made by Expo. We'll be having an app.json, which is basically a configuration for Expo. We'll have the name of the app. a slug, basically a longer name. We'll have the version of our app, the orientation, if you want it to be a portrait or a landscape. We'll have the icon, the splash image that you want to load when the app is starting, as well as a few other configuration elements. So if you go to our app, you'll see that it's fairly similar to what we might find in basically normal React. So we have an app, it's a function component. And here we'll get back to this later on. And this is basically the styling here. And we'll see later how styling works with React Native, as we have no way to use CSS since it's not in the web. So no CSS, no HTML. As you can see here, we can't choose divs or anything neither because we are not using HTML. So we have a small blank project running here. So let's start it. We can start it. Let's get back to our terminal. As we can see, we can start it with Expo start, but we already have a script for it here. So if we use npm start, it should run Expo start for us. We can use either Expo start here, since we have Expo installed, or we can just run npm start, and it should start our app for us. So as it says, it's opening our DevTools on the browser. It's given us a QR code. If we want to use the project with the QR code, we can install. Actually, that's a cool feature of Expo, is that we can install Expo on our mobile phone. And if we open Expo on our mobile and scan the QR code, then we will basically have the app running directly on our phone, which is something that can be done through Expo, but we can do without Expo. So here it gives us where we can open our app. So basically, this is the port and the local host. So let's open this here. Oops, it seems I made a mistake. Let's start it again and open the local host. Let's open it with Chrome, as we have it already open. And if I open here with Expo, you should see basically the Metro bundler, and it says basically how I can run. It gives us the QR code again. And it says if you want to run it on an emulator or we run it on a web browser. So here I'm going to run it on the web browser. You have a lot of options here that you have only in Expo. So there we go. Let's open it on Chrome. And you'll see here, basically, it will give us, we need to use a phone. Basically, we can, the advantage of Expo is that we can look in our browser as well. So we can choose, for example, the phone size here, and we can directly start working. So if we go back to our app here, and we work on the app.json, and we can change this message and say, hello from my Expo app, you'll see that it changes directly. So basically, Expo works like that. And the advantage, like I said, of Expo is that it's able to run in the browser, directly in your web browser. So it doesn't change from your usual development experience where you can use with the browser directly, even though it gives us the choice to run it on an iOS simulator if you have it installed, or an Android device or emulator if we have it installed as well. So for now, we won't go any deeper into Expo. Just wanted you to see how it runs and how it looks. But for the rest of the course, like I said, we'll be switching to a no Expo app. So let's close this and get back to our presentation. Let's close this and get back to our root folder. So let's get back to the presentation, and here we'll see how to create an app without Expo. So basically, we can create our app manually by adding file by file to our project, or we can use a boilerplate. So here we will be using boilerplates Expo, even though we won't be using Expo as a framework. There are actually a lot of boilerplates that you can find online or on GitHub. You can type on Google React Native boilerplate, and you'll find a lot of them. So I will show you. If we tap React boilerplate, you will actually find a lot of them. And so here, for example, you will have, I'm sorry, I seem to have mistaken, I forgot to write React Native boilerplate. So you'll find a lot of them, a lot of boilerplates that you can start with. We see in a boilerplate here, and another one here. So a lot of boilerplates you can start with. So this is called ERN boilerplate, and this is the coding machine React Native boilerplate. So you can start really with any of those, or as we are going to do now, you can choose the Expo boilerplate. Keep in mind, it doesn't mean that because we're using the boilerplate, it means we're using Expo. In this case, we won't be using Expo. So how we do that exactly is that let's get back to our terminal, and we'll do exactly like we did earlier. We'll do Expo init, and we'll give it a name, or maybe we'll give it a name here because I want to give it npm as well. So clear, I will have Expo init, my rn app, and I wanted to use npm. So this time, because I don't want to use the Expo framework, I won't be choosing manage workflow. I will go down and use bare workflow, the minimal workflow. And what that does, it will run React without the Expo framework, as I will show you in a second. So as it is installing, let's actually open the code editor and start taking a look at the files while it installs, so we win time. So let's open another folder. Let's open the folder of our new app and open my React Native app. So here you'll notice many differences in the files. For example, if you go to package.json, you'll notice that that start is no longer using Expo. It uses actually React Native start. And that's because we are no longer using Expo as our framework, basically. So we no longer use that. And actually, even here, you can have this changed. We can get rid even of all scripts made by Expo. We can just, get here and excuse me. In terms of scripts, we can change these to like this. For example, instead of Expo run Android, we can have this be React Native run Android, React Native run iOS. We can keep this for the web, but we won't be using it. And well, that's it, basically. So now we are not using Expo like at all when using React Native. And as you can see, we are now, it looks almost the same, but we are now using React Native without Expo. And major difference you'll notice is that now we have two folders. One is called Android and one is called iOS. So Najar asks, what means web script in package.json? So this means I want to see my app in the web through Expo, but we can actually get rid of it. Basically, it's if you don't want to use an emulator, but this is really bad because most of the time, if you run it through the web, it will not work like you would expect it on mobile. So actually, let's get rid of it. We don't need it because we're focusing on mobile development here. But basically, it's like that. It's like if you want to see how it would look without opening your emulator. So let's keep it without the web scripts. And like I said, what you would notice first is that now we have two new folders, Android and iOS, and these are folders that are hidden by Expo. Like I was saying in the presentation, quite a few things are hidden when we are using Expo, and these are one of those. And basically, why do we need those? Is that we need them if we are building more complex applications. Sometimes it might happen that we'll need to come here and change basically some Java code. Even though we're not using Java, we might need to come here and change some things in a few advanced cases, in very complex cases, but we won't be needing to do that most of the time. So let's actually keep those closed. We also need to edit those when you want to basically change how our IPK is built. If we use this way, everything will be supported, but we'll be responsible for adding our APIs, our libraries, and notifications ourselves. The good thing with Expo is that it does it for you, but it doesn't give you choices as what you can add and what you can't add. That's the problem with Expo, is that you don't have the choice as what services to use and what APIs you can use. You'll need to use the APIs included in Expo. This way, you don't have APIs included, but you can use whatever API you want to download from NPM. You can go to an NPM and download anything you want, and everything is supported. And like I said, for advanced things, you can even write Java code to complete the app. You can come here and, for example, something very useful is that you can open, let's say we want to build the app and we're publishing it to the store. You can come to the build.gradle here. You can change the minimum Java, minimum Android version. You can go to build Gradle properties, change how much RAM you might need. You can go to the set to Gradle here and change other things. Basically, or go to the app and build.gradle. And here you might want to change, for example, what can we change? Java version, the name of the app you see here is called My app. It's the ID. You can change that ID. You can change a lot of things here, but like, it is not necessary. You just need it really when you are advanced and you are at the end of a project and you want to build something for production or something. But it's not really necessary. So what we'll do now is that we'll start this app. So how do we start it exactly? Is that basically first thing to do is we go inside our project. Like explained and like shown in the tutorial included in the presentation at the start, you should at this point have an Android emulator installed through Android Studio. I already have it installed, like I said, to win us time. So the first thing I'm going to do is start my emulator. I will start it from the terminal, but you can start it from Android Studio as you would see in the tutorial anyway. So I'm just going to start my emulator. I'm going to zoom in this again. So this is my emulator. You'll see it's loading. And basically what it does, it's going to emulate a phone. So let's close this and wait for our emulator to finish launching. It seems it has closed. I don't know why. Core dumped. Let's try it again. It seems the emulator has crashed. Okay, now it's good. So here you'll see it loading a mobile phone, an Android phone. And basically it will behave like a normal phone. I can install and uninstall applications and everything like that. So it's like a normal phone, basically. I could install Facebook, I could install Instagram and use it from the emulator here. So now that we have our emulator, first thing to do is that you will notice that from the terminal, you will have a command that will tell you if it's detecting the emulator correctly, which is called ADB devices. We'll run this, excuse me, ADB devices, and it will say, hey, I'm detecting a device called emulator 5554. So we're good to go. This is good. So now what we'll need to do is that we need to do two things. So I'm going to split my emulator in two. I'm going to store my terminal in two, excuse me. So I'm going to use two terminals. In the first one, I'm going to run npm start, which is going to start my development server. And as you can see now, I have a server running, and it's called Metro. So the server for React Native is called Metro, and what Metro does is basically it allows for hot reloading and console logging. Because in a real phone, you don't actually have a console. So Metro, what it does, it allows you to have console logs, and it allows you to have an auto refresh on your app. Think of it like NoDaemon that we saw today for Node, and it's included by default in React Native. So we started our Metro server. Like it says, welcome to Metro. So Metro is running. Now that Metro is running, what we will do is that we will run npm run Android. And yet you'll see that we'll start actually building our Android application natively. As you can see, it's downloading Gradle here. Gradle is, you see how NPM and Node are there to build JavaScript files. Gradle is what builds Java Android applications. So that's how you know actually we're building a native Android app and not just a web view. So we're building a legit Android app. It's downloading Gradle right now. And once Gradle is done downloading, you'll see that it will basically install to our emulator here. So let's do this like this so we can always see our emulator. We'll do it the same for our, actually for our code, so you can always see the emulator. There we go. So let's let it finish. And in the meantime, let's maybe take a look at the code we have. So nothing really out of the ordinary here. Like we said earlier, just a component that is running. So we should see this text pop when we get the app on our emulator. So we have nothing else in terms of code. We'll start writing code after this, so we can write our first app. For now, let's wait for the Android build to be done. While we wait for it to finish loading, maybe let's review what we just did. So after following the tutorial at the start of this course, like I'm saying here, we should have Android Studio and the phone emulator installed. What I did is I started the emulator first. I ran in the terminal ADB devices to make sure that the emulator was detected by the system. We started Metro using npm start. And then we launched the build and running of our Android app using npm run Android. And now we're waiting for that command to finish running. So after that, we'll be starting with the code. Okay, it seems we have an error here. What is the issue? We have build failed command. What's the issue here? What went wrong? Welcome to Gradle. Starting a type error. Module.createRequire is not a function. Okay, this is a weird error to have. So let's debug it together, shall we? So I'm sure some of you may encounter this error. So let's check why it is showing us this error. So module.require is not a function. Maybe let's check if that is related to the version of React Native we are using. So let's type the name of the error and write React Native, Android, and take a look. It doesn't seem that there are many results here.
لازم نحضرها.
Is it related to Prettier? I don't think so. Maybe we'll try to run it again as we look, as sometimes this is maybe a bit unstable. So npm run Android again. It resolves with the same error. So stack trace, auto linking, benefit, where script modules. Let's try Expo, run Android maybe. So that's not it. What was written actually when we change it from the scripts here? Let's see. It was Expo run Android, so I'm not mistaken. Let's take a look. Is not a function. Editor, troubleshooting. This is kind of weird. So settings, try run with stack trace, fail that make error. My create module is not a function. Maybe we should change the version of Gradle. What is the version we are using here? So we downloaded Gradle 6, I believe. Gradle 6.9. So let's take a look. Gradle, React Native, Gradle 6.9 is not a function. Native, so what is the error exactly that we get? Type module one dot is not a function. Expo modules auto linking. Let's Expo modules auto linking. There. So what might be the issue? After some, okay. Seems to be an issue with the Expo boilerplate. So maybe let's start with a different boilerplate. Like we saw earlier, let's start with another boilerplate. React Native boilerplate. Let's start with maybe this boilerplate. Okay, so let's get started with this. Getting started, installation, and let's start a new boilerplate basically, since there seems to be issues with the Expo boilerplate. So let's delete this, my app, and let's run this command, npx, that you know, React Native init. We'll call it my rn app again. So, and we'll have the template. So let's have it run. We could, Muhammad, but when you run apps through Expo app in your mobile, it actually runs through a web view and it doesn't run natively, which is very different from when it runs natively. You will notice that some things that seem to work when running through the Expo app will stop working when you build for real Android, because it is ultimately a different environment. You must see React Native is and mobile environment is a bit more complex than the web environment, in a sense where it's way harder to debug, because when you're writing for the web, ultimately you're always writing for a web browser, and web browsers are very similar. But when you're writing mobile, depending on the mobile you have, the version of Android, etc., you might have issues. So running through Expo app in your mobile is actually too optimal. So I've worked on a few cases with clients in real life where everything works on the Expo app. And once you build for the real phone, there are some things that just stop working. So it's better that we test directly on a real phone or on a real emulated phone rather than on the Expo app and on mobile. It's safer. So here, just give me a moment so I can install another boilerplate. And we'll get started as soon as it's done. It seems to be done. So let's see what we have in this boilerplate. It is honestly my first time working with this boilerplate. Usually the bare Expo boilerplate works fine. It doesn't seem to have created anything. What's happening here? Yes, you'd use the Android Studio emulator, Mohammed. So here it seems we have an issue with this boilerplate as well, which is a shame, which is not something I expected. Okay, let's use nvm use 12 and run this again. Let's try this again. If it doesn't work, otherwise we'll work with Expo today, so you might see how things are done. So it's downloading the template. So only raise their hand, but I can't see it. So we're installing the dependencies now, and we should be good to go. Let's take a look. And let's get into my Iran app and see how everything is. See. We see that this is actually way more complete than the other one. So let's open it with, let's open the folder where it is installed. My Iran app will actually empty everything. So we don't need these assets and components and config and containers, hooks and everything. We'll actually download most of the, delete most of this as it's already using a lot of dependencies. But I want you to see how it would look like. Here we have access. A lot of dependencies are installed. Redux as well, Redux persist, but we won't be needing most of these. So it's just to show you how everything would look and works. If we use a boilerplate, we have a lot of things that are added by default. But don't worry, we won't be keeping these. We'll be writing our own fairly soon. So as soon as it's done installing, let's actually run it. I hope it finishes soon. So you might take a look at how it looks before we go on a small break. Okay, it's still installing dependencies. I'll relaunch this just in case. Let this run here. So it's still installing dependencies. As soon as it's done, we should be able to start our project. As you can see, most of the time, React Native is actually kind of annoying to get running at the start. That's why a lot of people prefer Expo, and that's why I wanted to explain Expo to you, because it can be quite challenging to get working as expected. You always kind of encounter unforeseen issues when you're trying to run it. Actually, while it's installing, let's give the other boilerplate that we started with another go, since we are waiting anyway. So let's clear this and maybe try it again. Oh, okay, the other one is done, so it should be good. So here, this is done. Let's get into our new boilerplate. This is to see basically a full React app, how it React Native app looks. So now let's split it again, and we'll start our metro. Start or npm start. That will start our metro server, as we see here. So metro is running. Once Metro is running, we can basically run Android. Give me a second. VM use 12 and npm run Android. So now it's building our app, and it should show on our emulator as soon as that is done. This might take a few minutes to get running, as it needs, especially in the first build, as it will download the Java libraries required because it's building for Android, so it needs a lot of Java libraries that will download on the spot. While this is loading, I'll take a look and try to fix the error on the Expo boilerplate. So we might use that boilerplate since it's simpler and contains less stuff. Let's see if that is possible to fix. So it's running configuration. Should be a minute, and we should be good in a minute. I'm sorry for this time. Please be patient. As I said, it needs to run all Java downloads. So please bear with me for a couple more minutes, and we should see the results popping up on our emulator. So there we go, almost there. Almost. Should be almost done. The first time always takes the longest when you're starting a new project, so that's to be expected actually. Even when you're working on it by yourself. Keep in mind that it also you will also need a computer with quite a bit of RAM because it can eat up quite a bit, especially if you're using an emulator, then it will eat up quite a bit of RAM. So I'd recommend you need to at least have 8 GB of RAM on your computer if you're attempting to develop with React Native. That's actually a minimum requirement. 12 GB and above would be very good, but you can get started with 8 GB. As we are nearing 100%, we reach 100% for the installation of dependencies. Now it's just configuration, so it should take less time. Sorry for the delay again. That we have no choice but to wait for this phase, unfortunately. Unlike the web where everything goes really fast, on mobile, it's actually always a lot of waiting for building and compilations, to be honest. But thanks to the Metro server, we won't have to build again every time we want to show change, since basically Metro will handle the change for us. Almost there. And actually building on React Native is always a scary process because you're always afraid that it might fail due to a configuration or a library that is not well configured or anything. And whenever you install a library, that is a risk you take. So it is actually very easy to be scared of builds in React Native. Hopefully it will be done in a minute and we can go forward with the course. Go, go, go. In the meantime, maybe so we don't waste time, let's maybe look at the React Native documentation. So we look at a few concepts. So here, one of the most important concepts that you need to see is the view. So let's take at what the view is. You see, we use a lot of divs in HTML when we're working on the web. Since you can't really use a div in mobile, basically what replaces it is view. View is like a div. Most components that you'll be using per default in the API are views, text, and scroll views. Basically, you can see here, you can have a view, you give it a style, and you give it, so here, for example, giving it a height, a padding, a background color, and it shows like a div, like you can see on the right. It shows like a div would show on the web. So that's actually one of the most important components that you will need to use. Another one might be the text input, since we don't have inputs. So a text input is basically like this. You'd have a text input in place of input with a value like a web input with a value and an unchanged text. You also notice that events are a bit different. You don't have unchanged, but rather unchanged text. You will have quite a few actually different, let's say, events. Touch events can be quite different. For example, instead of on click, since we don't have a mouse, you'll have on press. We'll see everything about that when we start coding. As you can see, build is successful. So we go back to our emulator and we shall see the app running. As you can see here, if we go back to the root of our emulator, we should now see an app called My Emulator app, if you can see it. And if I open it, I have this app. And it's an app, since we're using a boilerplate, it's an app with already some functionality. We can enter a user ID. As you can see, this is a text input. So we can write whatever ID we might want. And it gives you a fake name. And basically, that is it. That's basically what our boilerplate does. If you wanted to change anything, then we need to go and change the code. Let's say we go here. We should find our app.js. And containers, we should have the example or the startup container with the brand and everything. And let's say we wanted to say, let's actually get rid of all this. If we delete all this in this component that is showing here, basically the screen, you'll see that basically if I go back here, why is it not changing? Example container, is this the one? Yes, this is the one. So if we go here and delete all of these, actually, let's only leave the scroll view. You'll see now it's empty. As I said, most of the time what you'll be using is scroll view and the view. Difference between a view and a scroll view is this. For example, if you put view here, let's get rid of all this. We'll write our own code just after this, so don't worry. We won't be staying in this complex boilerplate. I will try to make the simpler Expo boilerplate work while we are on break. So here, if for example I write text and I have a lorem ipsum, or let's say we write hello, and we write hello a bunch of times. Let's write this a bunch of times. Again, enough to fill the screen. You'll see that when I have scroll view, I can actually scroll to see the rest of the view. So I can scroll down and I scroll up. That's the main difference between the view and the scroll view. If I change this to be a view, what you might notice is that now it doesn't scroll anymore. And that's basically the main difference between both views. So what you'll have to basically remember is that we can choose HTML. So if I write div here, it will crash, saying that I don't know what div is. If we write anything related to the web browser as well, if you write document dot get element by ID or anything, hi, you'll see that it crashes as well because it says cannot find variable document. So just like in Node.js, we cannot use browser APIs. So we need to forget about those. And we can choose HTML. So everything goes through a component. No H1s, no P, no input, no form, no HTML tags in React Native. So that's how we basically run a React Native app. As we can see it running here, we can close it like you would close a normal Android app, and I can open it from basically my menu, just like we would call any app, to be honest. And we'd have our app. Does anyone have any question before we go on a 15-minute break? Any question as what you did up to now? I know we didn't do a lot of code writing, but when we get back from break, that's all we'll be doing. Basically, when we get back from break, we'll be writing code and writing code only. So if you have a question about the theory, now would be the time. As later, we'll be only writing code. I see there is no questions, so we might say that we will take a break here before we start the code, actually. And let's say we take a 15-minute break. All right. And see you guys in 15 minutes, okay? Okay, Mohammed. In the meantime, during the break, I will try and make the other boilerplate work since it's simpler to understand. I'll try to make it work during this 15-minute break. So when we get back, we'll start working on a simpler boilerplate. Thank you and see you in 15 minutes. Hello again. Is everyone back from break or not? Are you guys back from break or not?
Yes.
Good, good. Okay, since everyone is here, let's get back to it. So, like I said, for the rest of the session, we'll be writing code. We'll be practicing. You'll be happy to know that I found the issue with the Expo boilerplate. So it now works. We have a simple boilerplate to start with. Other than that, everything is as we saw before the break. So we'll be writing a small app today together in the remaining remainder of our time, where we will basically be using React Native views, text and styling. We'll use React Native touch events, and we'll work with libraries. We'll work with UI Kitten for the UI. We'll work with React Navigation to navigate between screens. We'll try to implement React Native Camera to access the phone camera. And we will try eventually to recreate the app that we did with React in React Native. Excuse me. So basically, that's our goal for today. We saw installation running in the first part of this course, but now we will just be writing code, basically. So let's get back to our code editor and our emulator. As we can see now, we have this Android emulator app called this app called My Errand app, which is the app from the smaller Expo boilerplate that we got back to. So it's basically empty. There is nothing in it. There is only one component, which is the main component called app. And all it has is basically text, open up app.js to start working on your app. So the text, let's start by talking about the text component. So the text component is basically a replacer for everything here. So let's see. So text would be the text component text. It would be a replacer for basically H1, H2, H3, all these headers, as well as the P tag in HTML. So basically, whenever you want to write text, display text, you need to put it in a text. So in HTML, right, you can't put text that is not in a header or a paragraph or anything. In React Native, you can't. So if I delete the text here and just put the view in the text, basically it will not work, saying text strings must be rendered within a text component. So whenever you want to write text, you need to put it in a text component. There is no choice there. You need to do it. You have to. So let's change the text inside and say, hello, go digital trainees. You'll see that change in our Android phone. And well, let's take a look at the text component documentation to see what we can change. So let's look at it here. Let's say what props it can get. So this is a list of props. We have a lot of props that we can put. We can have, for example, we can have the styling. We can have an ID, a number of lines. We have a few events that we'll take a look to. We'll take a look at. We have accessibility, which is basically props if you want to your app to be compatible with people that are blind who cannot see. You can have the accessibility hint, which is something that the phone will read if the person has configured their phone to be helping them because they can see right. So we'll use actually the text component to start seeing how we can do styling. Let's say we know that, for example, it's a replacer for H1, H2, H3, and P, but we don't know actually if how we can change sizes. So let's create actually a styling. Let's create a new component, our own components, create a folder. We'll call this, excuse me, call this SRC. We'll see you have index here. So we'll move the app to the SRC, which will technically crash our app because it can no longer find the app here. And we'll say that you can find it on the SRC, then app. So now it should be fine if we just delete this. Let's actually reload their app because it crashed. So we reopen it and it should be fine. Server response, we have an error. So let's look at our terminal. It seems we have an error here. Oh, okay. So it doesn't like this. It wants a slash here. And let's reload. So there we go. It's working fine again. So let's open our SRC and create a folder called components. And what we'll do is that we'll create our own custom text component. And this custom text will create basically our component. Let's basically copy this. We can have this right here, custom text. We won't need the view. And here we can see that basically we'll be writing React, nothing special here. So we'll be writing function text, which takes props. And what we'll do is that we will return text. Let's call this actually custom text. I'm sorry, custom text. And what we'll do here is that we'll display text. And here we'll be having props.children. And then we can have export default custom text. Let's format this. And now what we can do is that we can go to our app and replace the text with our custom text. Let's import our custom text. Import custom text from components/custom text. And we'll actually replace this with this. So now it should work relatively the same. confound variable React. So yeah, it's because we forgot to import React here. We'll need to always import React in our scope. So let's import React from React, and which we should be fine. So now we haven't changed anything to how everything works. We just took the text and put it in its own custom component. Is everything clear for everyone up to this point? We didn't do much. All we did is create a custom text using the normal React native text. Okay? Good. Good. Now what we'll do is that we'll try actually to simulate the H1, H2, H3, and P variants. So what we will do is that we will create, now I'll show you how to create styling. So now what we will do is that we will go here, we will go to, we'll create a new file called styles.js. And here it's very important, we'll need to import style sheet from React Native because we can't have CSS. So we need to have style sheet from React Native. And what that does is that we will have a function generate styles, or let's call it actually function, export default function generate styles. And what we'll want to do is that we will return a style sheet dot create, and we will create it using an object. So here we give it an object, and now we want to start using basically styles per class name. So what we'll do is that we'll say, for example, styles, let's create one called H1. Okay. So in H1, we'll give it an object, and we'll say, for example, we want the font size to be equal to 10. So no pixels. It was called, these are called units. In React Native, there are no pixels. So you don't have to do it like this. This will actually not work. I'll show you the error, but later on. But basically, you'll be using pseudo CSS properties. As we know, this is like CSS for is equivalent of font size. This is like we saw in React when you want to use inline styling. Basically, what you do is you remove the hyphen and capitalize the next letter. Basically, you turn it into camel case. So this is how you would, for example, increase the font size. So now what we will do is that if we go to custom text, in here, what we can do is that first we need to import styles, import generate styles from styles that we just created. We can have here constant styles equal generate styles. And then what we can do is that we can go here and do style and give it styles.h1. As you can, and here, of course, we need to give it a bit more, 32, let's say, and you'll see that the size increases now. If I go 34, if I go 36, if I go 24, you'll see that the size increases. Any questions up to this point? Anything not clear in what we just did in terms of styling? Okay, so let's keep going. So we want to have all different variants, like we said in our app. We want to have H1, H2, H3 at least. So what we'll do is that we will change this a bit and we'll say, for example, we'll say here we'll get rid of this. We'll say, for example, I don't know, root. We'll call this root instead of h1. And we'll call this root. And what we'll do is that now we'll try to pass this as a parameter. Props children. That's actually an excellent question, Muhammad. So props the children is this. Whenever you put inside a component, is put in the children. Whatever you put inside. So doing this is exact same thing as doing this. That's exactly the same thing. This is equal to this. Anything you put inside the component ends up in the children prop. Is that clear, Muhammad? Good. So what we'll try to do, so now that we've given it a root, what we'll try to do is that we'll give parameters our generate styles. We'll give it a parameter with the font size, or we'll give it size, for example, being props.size. Okay? And then what we can do is that if we go to here, we can add size. And instead of having it like this, we can give it like this. All right, size. Or by default, we wanted to take, I don't know, 12 or 14. Okay. We'll give it 14 by default. Otherwise, we'll take the props.size. And what that means that we can come here in our custom text and give it a prop called size, where we can give it the size we want. So now we can edit it as a prop instead of having to play with the styling each time. So that means that we can have one custom text at 24, another one at 18, and another one at 14, and let's say another one at 12. Depending if, for example, we could have this to replace our h1, and this to replace our h2, and this h3, and we can say this is, for example, to replace our paragraph. So that's how we would actually extend the text, so we can basically have excuse me. Excuse me. So we can have different sizes like we do have on HTML. Is that understood? Is that clear? Okay. So let's actually move this outside of here. Let's create a new folder that we'll call pages. And here we'll have a new page that we'll call, let's not call it pages, actually, let's call it screens, since we're not in HTML, screens. And here we'll create a new folder called text showcase, where we will put that code so we can keep the app clean. Basically, what I'll do is that we'll go here and we'll copy this, and we'll call this text showcase. And custom text would be, of course, from point. Okay, so this would be correct. And that means that the page text showcase from screens and text showcase. And here we can just put text showcase. So that should keep it clean. So we can have our screen on the outside with everything we might need. We'll put it there so we keep our app always clean. Let's actually take this there as well. We don't need it to be here. Let's take it to the text showcase. Okay, it's actually already there. So, okay. Usually what we'll want to do is put this in a scroll view though. Why we want to put it in a scroll view is that because we want to, if we were to have, let's say here, a view, and let's call style sheet. For example, if we want to have this be like this here, a view, for example, with the style being styles dot my view. Let's say we want this like this, and then we can create a style sheet here. Styles equal style sheet dot create, and we can have, for example, my view, and we wanted to have background color being red. We want the width to be 600, and we want the height to be 1000. Okay, this needs to be in a string, I'm sorry. So what you'll see here is that we need to scroll to see it, or let's have it maybe be a bit smaller. Have it be 500. My view 1. And let's have another one here be my view 1 and my view 2. Let's have another one just like it. And have it in blue. And now if we have scroll view, I actually can scroll to see the whole height. That's why we might need to have a scroll view instead of a view in the root. Otherwise, I won't see much. So let's actually move this to its own showcase as well. Let's call it scroll view showcase. We can put it there so we don't clutter our code. 7docs.js. We'll just copy the app as usual and have the scroll view like this. We don't actually need the text showcase, so that's fine. And we just call this scroll view showcase. We'll call this like this, and then all we need to do is that we'll have it here, scroll view showcase, case, view showcase, and we can delete all of this so we keep everything clean. So now we should have both of these showcases running here. How to express VH and VW in React Native? That's an excellent question. So I will show you this right now. I'm sorry. So what we do is that we'll need a hook called use window dimensions. Let's go to our scroll view showcase and do it there. What we'll do here is that we'll use window dimensions. And then we will have height and width. Whoops, wrote width twice. Height and use window dimensions. And then what we'll need to do though is that we'll need to move this here. Styles equal, we'll need to have it a function. We'll have dimensions or height, let's say window dimensions. And here we'll have, for example, if you want the width to be 100%, you'd use this. If you want it to be smaller, you do go like this. Let's say if you want it to be half, you'll multiply it by 0.5. But then it means that here, let's say, get styles. And we can have a function here. We'll use styles like we did for the text. We use styles equal get styles of height and width. Okay, width supplied. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. So I missed this dot width. And as you can see, that's how it works. So I'm expressing VW in terms of half VW thanks to the window dimensions. Does that answer your question, Abu Bakr? In terms of expressing view height and view width in React Native. So actually, there is no VH and VW in React Native because we are not in the DOM. So there are no DOM APIs. But the guys at React Native prepared the solution for us, which is called use window dimensions, which is basically a function that returns how many units the window width is and how many, let's say, how many units the height is. So if we use window dimension, it will give us a height and the width. Okay? Excuse me. So if we want to use that height and width in our style, we'll need to pass them as parameters to our get styles function that creates the style sheet. So you can then use the width or half the width or whatever you may want. But we won't be able to say, per se write VW or even percentage, by the way. Percentage, I believe it's possible, but I don't think we can do the V8. See, even percentage is not that good. So it's no CSS. If you want to use V8 and VW, you'll need to create your own alternative solution by getting the window width and height and then multiplying them by the value that you want. For example, I can have this half height. Basically, this means 0.5 VW. And this, if I put it like that, let's say this is equal to 0.45 VW. If I use it in the height, let's say this, I use it with window dimensions dot height times 0.6. Then it's like using 0.6 VH. Have it here a bit bigger actually. So you notice the difference. See what I mean? If I want the blue to take the full height of the screen, for example, I can just give it the full height and no multiplier, which that means it will be like 1 VH. And you'll see that now when I scroll to the blue, It scrolls until it fills the whole screen because its height is the same as the full window height. So that's basically how you would replace VW and VH in React Native, even though you don't have specific VH and VWs. Anyone has any questions regarding what we just saw? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. No media query for that, because what you need to know is that basically, how do I say this? Basically, as you saw, we don't use pixels. There are no pixels. So it doesn't reason in terms of how many pixels there are on the screen. Phone screens are cut in grids. So basically, out of the box, it will adapt to small screens and middle screens and so on. What you need to do, though, to make your app suitable in terms of screen size is not middle screens and small screens. That's not important. What's important is that is the phone in landscape or in portrait. What do I mean by that? Like it's possible for your users to use the phone in this way, for example. And that changes everything because you want to have a display for when it's horizontal, and you want to have a different display for when it's vertical, right? Most of the time, you'll want to change your app layout depending on if they're holding their phone horizontally or vertically. And how you do that is that basically very easy, is that you can have a variable here. You can call it is portrait. And what is portrait is like if the height is superior to the width, it means that they're holding it vertically. If not, then it means that they're holding it horizontally. So if we go like this, we should then be able to adapt. Let's say here we could, for example, here we have is portrait. We can add it here. And what we could do is that we could have this, let's call this window. And what we could do here is that we could, for example, have, I don't know, let's have this be green if we are not in portrait mode. So let's say if we're holding it vertically, I want it to be blue, is portrait. So is portrait. If it isn't in portrait, I want it to be green. Otherwise, I want it to be blue. Okay. Okay, so I forgot to put window dot. So now I'm holding it vertically, right? So it's blue. But if I were to, let's say, turn it upside down, then it turns green. See? So you have no media queries, but you will have to play with use window dimensions to basically figure out what to do with your layout. And you can change your layout, for example, like I've shown here, for example, by saying if it's vertical, style it this way. If it's horizontal, style it this way. Is it clear, Abu Bakr, in terms of making it suitable for users? Yes, definitely. Every page you're going to create, you'll have to account for horizontal and vertical displays, depending on your users if they're holding their phones horizontally or vertically. And that's important. So yes, As I said, even though React Native is not that different from React, is there any method that can make something default layout that count all these things? Yeah, I mean, you could use it in your app, but most likely you will need differences by page. Most likely you will need to change specific things from pages. So, but if you need something by default, you can definitely put it in the app, so in the root of your application. Otherwise, you'll need to do it by page, because like I said, most likely you'll have differences that are very specific from page to page. But it still tries to count. I mean, we were using React JS. We were playing with Media Query and components. Yes, but React JS runs on a browser and in the web. React Native builds native, basically native, native. I'm sorry, native mobile components, which are not the same. There are no CSS, so no media queries. We're not doing web here. There are no web browser, no DOM, no CSS engines to help us do the things we used to do with React.js. Ultimately, React.js runs on the browser the same as HTML, the same as everything else. This is different. This runs on a mobile and it runs native on top of that. It's not like an Ionic, for example, where you're running a web view. So yeah, I'm sorry, but you'll have to deal with not you having media query to play with. I mean, that's mobile development. What do you want me to say? So Muhammad asks how to make the orientation fixed. So there's actually, to do that, we'll need to import a library, a native API, but we need to import it ourselves since we're not using Expo. Expo has a native API, but since we're not using Expo, we need to use our own native API. We can go and look for it, React Native lock orientation. And you'll find a component called React Native Orientation Locker here. So we can install that if you want us to showcase how we can lock. How we can do that is that first we need to close our Metro server because we're installing something new. So we're going to go and install, how is it called? It's called React Native Orientation Locker. So we'll go here, have our orientation locker installed. This basically runs through a native API. Like you say, there is an automatic linking, but if you were to manually link, you see that you'll have to write Java code for it to be compatible with the native API, native Android API. But fortunately, since React 60 and React Native 60 and above, you don't need to link manually. The linking is done automatically, so we won't have to write any code in Java. Basically, we don't need to write any native Android code. This will do it for us. The automatic React Native linking will do it for us. So let's start our Metro server again. And rebuild our Android app. We'll basically need to do this every time we install new libraries. Even though we have Metro running and technically we should be having auto refresh, When we install new components, new libraries, basically since they need to auto-link, we'll need to rebuild so they can build the Java as well. Because we can't refresh Java, we can only refresh the JavaScript we're writing. Since we can't refresh Java, we'll need to rebuild every time we install a new library. Fortunately, it would go faster than earlier because we already installed most of the components. Sorry. This should finish quite soon. It should stay under a minute, and we should be good to go. Go ahead, 99%. Go, go, go. Build successful, and now it opens in our emulator. So let's get back to code. As you can see, we have everything here as it did. So now if we go in the component that we just added, you can see that basically how it works is that usage, we need to import it first. So let's import it in our scroll view showcase, maybe. Let's import it here. Okay. And then what we'll need to do is that we'll go here and we'll lock. Where is it? Locked. We'll use orientation. For example, let's create a use effect. Use effect with an empty dependency, so it runs only once. So what we'll do is that we'll go with orientation that we just got, lock to portrait. And when we're done, we want to orientation dot unlock all orientations, so that when we unmount our screen, this page, it doesn't stay locked. So now it should work fairly fine. So now we're locking it to portrait. Let's relaunch our app to make sure everything is taken into account. So let's go relaunch this, and okay, our component is mounted. Okay, we made a mistake. I forgot to include React here. React.use effect. It should reload. And now though, if I go and turn it to landscape, it doesn't turn, it stays locked. Does that answer your question? Okay, my computer seems to be freezing. Can everyone hear me? Can everyone still hear me? Okay, I'm sorry because I had a bit of a lag at some point. My computer froze. Like I said, React Native takes quite a bit of RAM. So I hope this answers your question, Mohammed. Good. So Ahmed asks, layout view and buttons and input text are going to be different from iOS to Android, or will it be the same view? It's going to be the same view, Ahmed. And that's the good thing about React Native, is that basically you write once and you run it everywhere. The only time where basically you'll have differences between Android and between iOS is when you want to access the hardware. Let's say, for example, you want to use the GPS, you want to have access to the storage. All these kind of things are different from Android and iOS. But if you're not using things that are too specific, you should be fine writing the same thing for Android and iOS. Like I said, from my experience, the only times I had to write specific code for iOS is when basically I needed to access storage, because Android and iOS don't store files in the same places, and they don't approach permissions to access files the same way neither. So that should be fine. But otherwise, views and text and everything like that, it's the same. You write it once for Android and for iOS. No issues whatsoever. Okay, so now that we've done this, let's get to our next step. Basically, what we want now is we want to, we're going to comment these. Okay. And now what we'll want to do is that we'll add a new library. What if you want to use some sliders package such as swipers? Let's see, I don't know if swipers. You mean this? This? You should be fine. You should be fine. If you implement packages, they should specify if they need you to do anything different. But other than that, it should work again, no matter the platform. You shouldn't be able to import your package and go right on. Like I said, there might be some specific times where you might need to write different. So it's not the same package, Ahmed. It's not the same. You can't use web packages for React Native. You can't use the web swiper package that you use in the web on React Native. That won't work. Why it won't work? Because your swiper package that you're using on the web, it uses HTML and CSS. And we just established that you can't have HTML and CSS running on React Native. Do you understand me? Your swiper package relies on HTML. If we go and have swiper.js, you'll see that it uses divs in classes. You'll see that it uses flexbox, which is CSS and HTML. And we said that React Native doesn't support HTML, nor does it support CSS. So you can't use packages that are made with HTML and CSS. Pure JavaScript packages might work, but any package that you use for the web that relies on HTML, on CSS, and for JavaScript packages, even packages in JavaScript that rely on the DOM, on document.getElement or whatever, won't work. Because there is no DOM, there is no HTML, and there is no CSS in React Native. Is it clear, Ahmed? That's very important. It's not because we're writing JavaScript, you must not mistake it for web. We're not developing for the web right now. It's not the same. It's very important that you understand this. So please tell me if it's clear. This is extremely important. Hello? Can you guys, okay. As long as it's very clear, it's very important that you understand this concept, okay? So anything that relies on HTML, CSS, or the DOM is a no-go on React Native. It can't work. So if you want to use something that looks like it, like you do, like I just did, you write React Native swiper, and you'll find someone like here who made something that works just like it for React Native. So you'll find here, for example, React Native swiper. That works for React Native. You will probably find someone who made a library that works just like it, but for React Native. So look for that. Okay, let's get back to what we were doing. So now what I want to do is that I want to implement a UI library, okay? We're gonna go and look for a UI library. There is a UI library that I like a lot that is called UI Kitten, which basically implements the Eva design system. So this is it. I can show you a demo, by the way. So this is a demo. Basically, this is what it would look like. You have lots of components. You have basically anything you might need, from customizing colors, from theming, ready to use components. It basically makes your life easier, and honestly, I've been using it for a while and I actually like it a lot. So let's try installing UI Kitten. So basically, let's get started, and you'll see the first thing we need to do is install basically manual installation. So basically, we need to install the components, the Eva design, and the React Native SVG, because it needs it for icons. So let's copy those. Whoops, I misclicked. So let's copy those, and let's go to our terminal. Let's do as we did earlier. Let's close our app. Let's close our Metro server. Let's clear both our terminals. And then let's install these new dependencies for our UI library. So let's wait for that to run and install. And then we can take a look at basically the UI library and how we can basically set up a few UI elements. Okay, it's done. Let's start my Metro server again. So npm start, right? And it should start our Metro server. So our Metro server started, so I can go here and npm run Android, which should build and run my Android app directly into my emulator. Let's give it a minute to work. It seems Zoom is lagging, so I hope you can still. I hope you can still hear me fine, because it seems Zoom is lagging right now on my computer. Can you guys hear me fine and see my screen fine? Can you confirm, please? Hello. Can anyone confirm that, please? You can still hear me fine and see my screen fine? Because it seems Zoom is lagging right now on my computer. Okay, good. I don't know why Zoom is lagging on the computer. They have the chat messages coming a bit late and everything is a bit lagging when it comes to Zoom. So let's go. So here we have UIKitten installed. Let's take a look at what we can do with it. Let's go and take a look at some components. Let's take a look at what we can do with the layout. We can have layout levels. Okay, so let's start with this. Let's start by creating a new page, a new screen. We'll call it our home. Let's call it the home screen. And in this home screen, we'll have the index.js. We'll import React from React. We will have a function called home with the props, which returns null for now. And we'll export default our home. And then we can come here and basically import it. Home. And we can here add the home screen. Okay. We should be fine. So now let's start implementing a bit of what we saw here. Let's take this and let's take the layout and the text from UIKitten and put it in our code here. Let's take all of this and put it here. We'll also get some styling. Let's copy the styling we got in the example. Let's copy the same and go create it on a separate file so we keep everything organized. Let's call it styles.js and go here and basically we'll import style sheet from React Native as we usually do. And we'll also export by default a function, export, okay. Export default function generate styles that will take parameters and then it will return, oops. It will return this. And then we will call that here. Import generate styles from styles, or we call it actually get styled, whatever. Okay, now we'll have const styles equal generate styles. There we go. It should work fine. Let's take a look. So here, I don't see anything actually. Is it working? The app is indeed calling home. So actually there is an issue. What seems to be the issue here? The home. So we have React. We have the layout and the text. Let's maybe restart the app. It seems that it's lagging. Let's restart the application. And it seems we have an issue here. Let's go take a look at our what seems to be the issue. Okay, so it seems we have not configured the app provider. So let's restart our Metro server actually. And it seems we have forgotten a step. we should go here and add an application provider like we do with basically Redux. So we need to have an application provider with the Eva theme and everything. So let's get this. Go put it in here. Where is our app? Actually, let's go to the index. And basically, let's go to the app. Let's import the application provider and the Eva design theme. Let's also copy everything in here. And get back to our codes and put everything inside the application provider. Let's actually have this function app here and delete this. Let's have export default. Let's have another one called function root and have it return the application provider. Where is it? I mean, it seems we've copied it wrong. Let's copy the application provider and the app. And have it here export default instead of the app. So we can have the application provider for UI Kitten. So now it should work. Let's rebuild our app. And this time it should work fine. So basically, this would remind you as well of Redux, which needs a provider as well. So you always need an application provider for UI Kitten, as like we do for Redux. So let's wait for the build to happen. It shouldn't take too long. And there we go. So the build is done. That should display it right now. So now we should be getting 4 different levels of layout, like in the example that we saw on there. Let's go and modify it from there. So let's close actually files we're no longer using and go and focus on the home page. So you'll see that we have these different things. So let's go to the container. As you can see here in the container, they're using the flex and the flex direction. We'll change it to column, actually. And we will have a layout. The layout go to basically height being flex height go to 100%. Or have it go to, I don't know. Let's get here and do the window dimension thing. Use window dimensions from React Native. And let's get width and let's get the window dimensions from here and send it to our generate styles. We can have the width and the height. And here we should have the height be height window. We have window dot height. Now it should take the whole thing. Okay. So now we should have maybe only this one. And have another layout inside. Let's now put a few cards in. Let's take a look at the card component. Let's take one that we like. Let's pick one that we like. We can have, for example, cards like this, or with the header like this. What else can we find? Navigation models, avatar. So let's have a few cards going. Let's add a card like this one here. Let's, okay, with header. Let's copy the one with the header. So let's look for the one with header, with header, with header. This is the one, card accessory showcase. So we'll need this, and then we will, let's take all of this and go and copy it in our code. Let's create a new component that we'll call, for example, that we'll call game card, like we did for our other React.js project. So we'll call it a game card. We'll create two files. We'll create index.js, and we'll create styles.js like we usually do. We'll come here and basically we will import React from React as usual. We will have a function component called game card that will return, okay, that will return this here. Okay, and this is not needed. And then we'll have all of this. And let's copy it elsewhere. So here we can have it like this, and then we can export default game card. What we need to do as well is that we'll come here and have import style sheet from React Native. And what we'll do is that we'll export default function, generate styles, which will basically return the style sheet that we just copied from UI Kitten's website, from their documentation. We'll get back to our game card and call that here. So we'll import our generate styles function from styles, and we'll just call it here. Styles equals generate styles. And now we should be having this one here. Now let's go to our home. And okay, let's reorganize it. Let's go to our home and have a few cards. Let's call a few, my component, game card component from components, not custom, game card. And we can have a few cards going here. So let's take a look. Okay, it seems we don't have all the dependencies that we want here, which is okay. Actually, you can get rid of this. You can have it empty. And what we need to have is basically we'll need to go and have the imports required that we didn't copy. So let's copy those and we should be good to go. We don't need the button. Otherwise, it should be fine. So header why doesn't it? Can't find variable header. Okay, so does it need a header? Where is the header? So here, okay. Does it need a footer as well? Yeah. Let's copy both of these, the header and the footer. Okay. And let's create a new file. Let's have a header.js in our game card. And let's have another one called footer.js where we can copy this one. Okay, this should be good. This should be good. Let's have our necessary imports. Let's have the imports from here. The header and the header should be, this should be fine for the header. We should have the view from React Native as well as it is needed. Let's copy those for the footer as well, even though the footer might need the button instead of the text. And then what we can have is I can export default footer. And we can have here export default header. And in our game card, all we need to do is that we need to import the header from the header file and the footer from the footer file. And we should be good for these dependencies. So let's take a look. Are we good now? So styles is not declared for the header and the footer, it seems. So what we can do is that props.style and styles here. So here, and in terms of styles, we can actually solve it quite easily. We can have it return here, and we can have we can import generate styles here as well. Styles from styles, and we can have the styles here as well. So there we go. As you can see, we have multiple cards now being displayed in our well, in our screen. So let's get back to home, shall we? And the game card we should add actually some margin to the cards. The card itself, let's add some margin. Let's call a 5 margin. Let's give it a 5. And let's take a look at the game card. And that should be fine. And actually now if we wanted to do, what we could do now is that we could go to the home screen. We could add some file with the placeholder data for now. Let's have some data here. Let's have data. Let's have data. Okay, this needs to be JSON. So data. Let's have an array of objects with basically name, the legend, Zelda, Arena of Time, year would be 1997. We could have developers be Nintendo, and we can have something else. Let's say add a couple of other games. 94. Let's have Mega Man 3, Sega. Let's have this 5, Skyrim in 2011 by Bethesda. And what we can now do is that we can go to the home and get that data. Data from placeholder data.json. And then we can have a function here with the constant data cards, and we can have it be data dot map with a game, and we can get a card here, and we'd give it, we'd spread the props from the game. And here we just display the data cards. So let's see if that works. It doesn't seem to work for some reason. Let's look up why it doesn't work. Let's try to launch the app again. Maybe there was an issue there. If there was an issue, it should tell us. So is there an issue here? Well, I don't see any issues. Maybe we should take a look at the console. Let's actually console.log the data and delete this. This is bad. Okay. And take a look. What is logged? So we should be fine. We have the developers, we have, so Nintendo, we have the name, the year, and everything. So we should be fine, actually. Oh, okay, my bad. So this should have a return here. So I forgot to have a return, and that's what was messing it up. So if I return it, it should be fine now. Yeah. So now that we have the props here, we should go and edit our game card. And we will basically have we will edit it to have, instead of Maldives, let's say what we will have with header, with footer, and let's actually delete this. Okay. Okay. The header is the one which needs the props. So here we should have the header, and here we could come here and have the header. How can we add props to it? We need to add props to get the name being displayed here. So maybe what I'll do is that instead of this, I will actually change things up and get this like that. Game card. And I will change this up a bit. So instead of having directly the header being called, what I will do is that I will have the props here, and I will have here header props. And what I'll do is like here put props.name by props.developers. What did I call it in the data holder? I called it developers. Props.developers, and here in the footer, I will, what did we have in the footer? Here, we had the buttons, but they don't seem to be displayed here anyway. So we can actually get rid of this. Let's get rid of this. And here we can have year of production and have it be props.year. And I guess now we could get rid of the header and the footer that we copied from their documentation. Okay, so view seems to be missing. So let's import that view from React Native. And we should be good to go. That should be fine. And we can basically get rid of these two. We can delete them if we want. Let's move it to the trash. We don't need those files. And in the styles here, we can also get rid of the footer here. There we go. There we go. So we only need the styles.card actually. So we can even get rid of this stub container. There we go. So there we have it. We have a small screen with different games. Basically, we're loading like we did in React.js. We saw styling. We saw how to implement use window dimensions. We saw how to lock orientation. And we saw how to import this library. And we launched basically our first React Native app. So I think that will be all for today. Next week, we'll be looking at React navigation, React Native camera, and we'll finish this project before we start looking at Firebase tools. So do you have any questions up to this point before we end today's session? Is there something I did in the code that is not clear or that you might want to review before we leave? Because we'll still have a lot to do next week anyway in terms of practice. Like I said, we'll go through navigation, we'll add Redux again, we'll try to use the camera, and we'll start using Firebase. So any questions? I don't know if Zoom is lagging or if it's coming from me. But do you guys have any questions at all? I'm not sure if the chat is stuck or if you guys are not asking any questions. No question, Al Najar? Everything is clear? Practice is always the most important part of anything when learning software, to be honest. It's always the most important part, but up to this point, is there anything that is not clear that might help you get more efficient practice? It's always good that when you practice, you understand the fundamental concepts. So if any of the concepts we've seen today is not clear, please do not hesitate to ask. What do you mean needed apps? To install? It is included actually. If you go back to my Ahmed Abu Bakr, I've included all apps that you would need here in the first in one of the first slides. I will be sharing this presentation with you guys. So every app that you will need, Abu Bakr, will be here in this list. I also included a tutorial for getting the emulator running. It should be fairly simple. We just didn't do it in live because it would take a long time. We would be spending an hour or an hour and a half waiting together. So that's a long process. So I wrote everything that you would need to download, and I included a tutorial for how to install it as well. It should be fairly simple. It's not that complicated. It just takes a long time. It's not complex. It's more the time that it takes. The issue is with time. So I'll be sharing anyway this presentation with you and the code we wrote today as well. So one of the first steps would be get your emulator running and try to run the code we wrote today on it. That, I guess, would be the first step in the review of today's session. So if there are no other questions, I think we can call it a day and say, guys, see you next week. Okay. So goodbye, everyone. See you next week. Have a great week. I think starting next week, we'll also be starting 1 hour earlier. We'll be starting at 11 p.m. Sorry, I mean 12 p.m. I think we'll be starting at 12 p.m. starting next week, if I'm not mistaken. I think the BTI can confirm that with you guys, but I think next week we'll be starting 1 hour earlier, so you guys can have time to go home before it gets dark. So see you everyone, and once again have a great week. I hope today's session was interesting. You're very welcome, BTI. Thank you for the efforts in setting everything up. So goodbye.